All yours.
All right. Well, good evening. My name is Carmen Wyatt, and I would like to welcome you to my presentation on an automated groundwater contamination analysis, which is completed through the creation of a geoprocessing tool for visualizing ash tracker data. So as an overview for this presentation, we will go through some of the background information on why this project is meaningful. Then we'll go on to the purpose or the goal of the project, as well as looking at the geoprocessing tool itself, then its scripts and outputs, as well as a conclusion to go over what we've chatted about. So for a little bit of background information, we are a very coal-dependent country. We have over 200 coal-fired power plants in the United States. And of course, these power plants produce a lot of coal ash, which has not always been regulated. However, regulations have been put into place due to spills from on-site landfills, especially in Tennessee and North Carolina, as well as concerns regarding the leaching of these contaminants or heavy metal constituents into the groundwater from unlined landfills that are kept on site. The coal ash is regulated by the EPA under what's known as the CCR rule, or coal combustion residuals rule, which was created in 2015. So for the purpose of this tool itself, there is a lot of data that we have about these coal-fired power plants and what is found underneath the ground in the groundwater. The data is available through groundwater sampling, and it's really vital to understanding the extent of contamination that's impacting our groundwater. The ashtracker.org provides these groundwater well samples through CSV files, and you can download them for all of their sites. And this information needs to be turned into really usable data, easily understandable, so that geologists and environmental scientists can take this and use it and, plan for a better future. Since there are so many sites, I chose Gallatin Fossil Plant, mostly due to the amount of wells found at Gallatin Fossil Plant, and this is in Tennessee near Nashville. The CSV file consisted of over 18,000 samples that were collected over a 9-year sampling period. They're sampled for 23 contaminants and 43 different well locations. However, 3 lacked location data and were removed through the script. The geoprocessing tool itself takes 5 different inputs: a project folder where you would like all the outputs saved, the site CSV, which is downloaded from ashtracker.org, a start and end date for the reporting itself, the samples that you would like to analyze, as well as the spatial reference. Since ArcPy does not allow the initial creation of a map series, which is how this is created, there's a template file which can be shared through a geoprocessing package with this tool. And the template file itself consists of the maps, the layouts, some files that will be recreated through the tool, as well as symbology for the outputs. The map series styles here consist of all of the symbology needed for creating the ISO contours, and they are standardized based on the threshold, the limit that EPA sets for that contaminant. The symbols are also going to be used to create the labels as well as symbolize our points for each well location. So the main output, the one that I wanted to create for this tool, were the ISO concentration maps, which consist of all of the samples at the site, all of the well locations. and then a contour of the threshold value, which for some of those, it may be the lifetime limit that the EPA has set or the maximum contaminant level, the drinking water advisory. And for each figure, we only wanted to show the most recent sample from the date range provided. We also wanted to symbolize whether it was above or below the threshold, whether that location, that sample was a compliant sample or if it was an exceedance of that threshold. The contour itself shows an inferred area of contamination. This is also created through the use of dynamic text. The title blocks and the notes are all dynamic so that it can just flow through the map series and so that each one is specific to that contaminant, such as here you can see sulfate, and then the notes are specific to sulfate, or some of them are, not all of them. Some of them will be used on all figures. And then it's also in a standard format. So you aren't showing, such as this drinking water advisory, the DWA, in purple on this figure, pink on another, green on another. It's all standard so that they are perfect for reports. So this is the standard, kind of what we were looking for with a single contour, or it could be multiple if there were multiple areas of concern. But some concentration maps, of course, are just going to be green. They aren't going to find any contaminants throughout the samples, and these are all below the detection limit, symbolized here by the less than DL symbol. However, there were some ISO concentration maps that you would expect a contour to show up, like here, and they did not. No matter how things were changed, it just didn't seem to work as intended. Luckily, there weren't nearly as many where this happened, but it did occur. So moving on to parts of the script, the most recent sample is found by plugging in those dates, the start date and the end date as parameters, and then using the CSV file and converting it to a pandas data frame. And then in order to get only that most recent sample, the script runs through and queries the, well, it sorts, not queries, sorts the data frame. So we sort by contaminant and then by well name and then collection date, and then only keep that first of the duplicates so that we are not bombarded by 18,000 samples. And then for the symbology, like I said, it's going to pull from that map series style. And we're going to symbolize our wells based on a field within the CSV that was originally there, whether it is above or below the threshold. So if above threshold is true, it will choose the red point symbols and the red label symbols. And then that dynamic text within the labels will show the well name and the concentration for each sample. And then if it is false, it will actually either show that well name and concentration, or it will show us this second else, well, the first else here, that it is less than 0.001. It's pretty minuscule. And if neither of those are met, then we will actually get that less than DL, the less than detection limit. In order to create that inferred area of contamination, I had to use a dictionary from the contaminant to the standard threshold, since each contaminant does have a different standard threshold. So that is created from the beginning of the script and then plugged in later into a for loop for each contaminant of interest or constituent of interest, the COI. There in that second script screenshot. And then in order to actually create the contours, I used the contour list tool. That way we could create them based on that one specific value. Whereas if you just used a regular contour tool, you would get them by however many spaces you had requested, by 5 or by 10. But this was a way to gain just that one single contour. And then within the for loop, each contour that is created is appended to the output file of the master contour in order to create a single file that will be run through the map series. As for the dynamic text, the title blocks and the notes were both created through the dynamic text as well as the labeling. The notes, some of them are created standard, such as this note 1 up top, and that just pulls from the different fields of the CSV. However, down at the bottom, the note 3, it will actually calculate different exceedances, and those come from the count from within the layer inside the initial for loop. These are then output to the map series file that is created so that they can be pulled into each individual figure. And that is the title block basic structure. The figure 1 is standard, and then such as this one says 22, it is dynamic, and that is based on the sort field that is created within the script. They will all have isoconcentration map, that is standard. Sulfate at Gallatin fossil plant is created within the script, pulling the contaminant and then adding the at, as well as whichever facility name it pulls. And then the bottom 2 lines are dynamic as well, pulled directly from the CSV file. Once I got started in this project, I just kept thinking of other ideas that would be really nice to help visualize what was going on at each site. And so one thing that really stood out to me were these time series charts, where you could see over each contaminant what is going on. And as I looked at this, I also realized that we were not sampling continuously either. And here's a zoomed in version on that. So you can see the way that things change at each different sampling location, and it gives each well name as well as the dates that span for that contaminant's sampling. Once I saw those charts, I thought, well, what if we took each well and combined all of the different contaminants that were sampled for? And I started to look at this and I thought, wow, you can really see some kind of patterns between different contaminants, which led to trend maps. And I thought this was going to be a great idea, the trend maps. And I was like, well, you know, we can see how these charts are actually impacting. We can get our Z values and our P values, and we can see if it's really significant or if, you know, it's not as significant as we had thought. But of course, with the way that the sampling was not continuous, it's a little bit flawed at the moment, but this is definitely an area of research for the future because these seem like they would be very indicative of what is really going on.